Michael Jordan set to take the stand today in his antitrust lawsuit against NASCAR. The NBA legend co-owns NASCAR team 2311 with racing star Denny Hamlin. Now they and another team are claiming NASCAR acted as a monopoly, leaving some teams at a disadvantage.
Michael Jordan walked into a federal courthouse in Charlotte, North Carolina on December 6, 2025, and what he said on that witness stand might change NASCAR forever. The same man who dominated basketball for years just told a packed courtroom that NASCAR has been treating its race teams unfairly for decades, and he's not backing down until things change. Let me explain what's really going on here, because this story is way bigger than most people realize. Jordan owns a NASCAR team called 2311 Racing with driver Denny Hamlin. They started this team back in 2020, and Jordan has put somewhere between $35 and $40 million of his own money into it. That's a massive investment. But here's the problem. Even with all that money and Jordan's huge name behind the team, they're barely making any profit. In fact, in 2024, the team actually lost $2.1 million. Now you might be thinking, well, maybe Jordan just isn't good at running a race team. But that's not the real issue at all. The problem is how NASCAR splits up the money with its teams.
I want to see that son of a bitch dead. And then he dies, and you're like, oh, so NASCAR is in trouble, almost on its deathbed.
Jordan stood in that courtroom and explained something that made a lot of sense. He said NASCAR doesn't have real partnerships with its teams. They treat them more like contractors. And when you compare it to how the NBA does business, the difference is huge. In basketball, the players get about half of all the money the league makes. In NASCAR, the teams get way less than that. Jordan put it like this: the revenue split was far less than any business I've ever been a part of. We didn't think we'd ever get to what basketball was getting, but we wanted to move in that direction. He also said something that really hit hard. He talked about how NASCAR is missing something important, which is shared responsibility. In other words, when NASCAR does well, the team should do well too. And when things aren't going great, everyone should share that burden together. Right now, that's just not happening. But let's back up and talk about why Jordan decided to sue NASCAR in the first place. Because this didn't just happen overnight. In NASCAR, there's something called the charter system. Think of it like owning a franchise in other sports. If you have a charter, your race car gets a guaranteed spot in every race, and you get a certain amount of money for showing up. NASCAR created this system back in 2016 to help teams have more stability. The problem is that these charters aren't permanent. They have to be renewed every few years, and the teams have been asking NASCAR to make them permanent for a long time now. They want to know that if they invest millions and millions of dollars into their teams, they'll actually own something valuable that can't just be taken away. In September of 2024, NASCAR gave all the teams a final offer for new charter agreements, and here's where things got really bad. They gave the teams just 6 hours to sign a 112-page document. It was basically take it or leave it. Sign this deal right now, or you lose your charter and everything that comes with it. One team owner's wife, Heather Gibbs, described it perfectly. She said, "It was like a gun to your head. If you don't sign, you have nothing." 13 of the 15 teams signed the deal, but Jordan's team and another team called Front Row Motorsports refused, and that's when they decided to sue NASCAR. Jordan explained his reasons for not signing very clearly. First, he didn't think the deal made financial sense. Second, there was a clause in the contract that said teams couldn't sue NASCAR, which Jordan thought was wrong. And third, he felt like NASCAR was giving them an ultimatum that just wasn't fair. During his testimony, Jordan said, "I wasn't afraid. I felt I could challenge NASCAR as a whole. I felt as far as the sport, it needed to be looked at from a different view. And you know what? He's probably the only owner who could actually do this. Other big team owners like Roger Penske and Rick Hendrick have car dealerships and other businesses that depend on having a good relationship with NASCAR. They can't afford to sue. But Jordan is different. He's already made his fortune in basketball. He doesn't need NASCAR. He just loves the sport and wants to see it be better." Jordan even talked about his childhood growing up in North Carolina and taking road trips with his family to watch races at places like Talladega. His favorite driver was Richard Petty at first, then later Cale Yarborough. This isn't just a business investment for him. He genuinely cares about NASCAR. But caring about the sport also means he sees the problems clearly. And one of the biggest problems he pointed out is about who's taking the real risks. Jordan said, "I never saw Jim France drive a car. I never saw Jim France risk his life. Jim France is the chairman of NASCAR, and his family has owned and run NASCAR since it started back in 1948. Jordan's point was simple. The drivers are the ones strapping into 3,400-pound cars and going 180 miles per hour. They're risking their lives every single week, but they don't have insurance policies or unions to protect them. Meanwhile, the France family is making huge profits. In fact, documents revealed in the trial showed that NASCAR made over $103 million in profit in 2024. The France Family Trust received almost $400 million over a 3-year period. Goldman Sachs valued NASCAR at $5 billion in 2023. Meanwhile, Bob Jenkins, who owns Front Row Motorsports, testified that he has lost $100 million since he started his team in the early 2000s. He's never made a profit, not even once, despite winning the Daytona 500 in 2021. So why do these owners keep doing it? Because they love racing. But Jordan thinks that's exactly why NASCAR needs to change. Teams shouldn't have to lose money year after year just because they're passionate about the sport. The costs are incredibly high. It takes about $20 million just to bring one car to the track for all 38 races in a season, and that doesn't even include overhead costs, driver salaries, or running the business. But NASCAR only guarantees $12.5 million per car with the current charter agreement. That's a loss of $7.5 million right there, before you even count anything else. Denny Hamlin, Jordan's partner in owning 23XI Racing, was even more fired up during his testimony. He spent 3.5 hours on the witness stand and didn't hold back. He called the charter agreement, essentially, my death certificate for the future. He said if they signed it, they wouldn't be in business within 10 years. One of the most emotional testimonies came from Heather Gibbs, who helps run Joe Gibbs Racing. She took over part of the business after her husband Coy died suddenly in 2022.
Heather Gibbs, Joe Gibbs's daughter-in-law, she was very emotional. She said she felt like NASCAR put a gun to their head and they did not want to sign.
She described how devastating it was when NASCAR gave them that 6-hour deadline to sign the charter agreement. Her father-in-law, Joe Gibbs, who is 84 years old and has already lost both of his sons, called Jim France personally to beg him not to do this to the teams. France basically ended the conversation without budging. This trial is going to continue for several more weeks, and nobody knows exactly how it will end. If Jordan and Front Row win, NASCAR might have to completely change how it does business. The judge could even force NASCAR to sell parts of the company or tear apart the entire charter system. But if NASCAR wins, Jordan's team might go out of business completely, and that would mean one of the most famous athletes in the world tried to make NASCAR better and failed. NASCAR just had its worst week ever, and the leaked text messages are so bad that even the most loyal fans are questioning everything about the sport. What came out is going to change NASCAR forever. So here's what happened. There's this big court case between NASCAR and 2 race teams, 23XI Racing and Front Row Motorsports. The teams are saying NASCAR acts like a monopoly and treats them unfairly. But last Friday, the court released a bunch of private text messages and emails from NASCAR's top bosses. And let me tell you, what's in those messages is absolutely shocking. The biggest problem is what NASCAR Commissioner Steve Phelps said about Richard Childress. Now, Richard Childress is a legend in NASCAR. He's a Hall of Famer who owned Dale Earnhardt's race team and won 6 Cup championships. He's been in this sport forever, but Steve Phelps called him a stupid redneck who owes his entire fortune to NASCAR. He also said Childress needs to be taken out back and flogged. That means beaten with a stick or whip. Phelps called him an idiot, a dinosaur, and a total clown. These weren't just random thoughts either. This came after Richard Childress went on the radio in August 2023 and talked about how the new race cars are way too expensive. Childress said the teams are spending more money than ever, and he questioned who's really going to benefit from NASCAR's new media deal worth billions of dollars. When NASCAR executives saw this, they went crazy. Richard Childress Racing put out a statement saying they're deeply disappointed and considering legal action. They said these comments show how NASCAR executives have always treated team owners who devoted their lives to the sport. And here's the thing. NASCAR admitted that Steve Phelps called Childress a few weeks ago to tell him about these texts and say he didn't really mean it. But the damage is done. You can't say those things about someone and then just apologize when you get caught. But it gets even worse. NASCAR's top guys were also scared of a racing series called SRX. This was Tony Stewart's series that ran short track races for just 2 years from 2021 to 2023. It was small, only about 6 races each summer, but NASCAR was absolutely terrified of it. When Denny Hamlin said he was going to race in SRX in 2023, Steve O'Donnell texted Steve Phelps saying, "This is NASCAR. Pure and simple. Enough. We need legal to take a shot at this." And Phelps responded, "These guys are just plain stupid. Need to put a knife in this trash series." Think about that. NASCAR's president wanted to kill a small racing series just because some of their drivers wanted to race there on their days off. They felt threatened by 6 races a year on Thursday nights. One text even admitted that SRX was getting better TV ratings than NASCAR's Xfinity and Truck Series. The funny part is that NASCAR being scared of SRX actually helped fans. Because NASCAR was worried that SRX would work with Dale Earnhardt Jr. and go to tracks like North Wilkesboro and Bowman Gray first, NASCAR rushed to bring racing back to those historic tracks. So even though SRX only lasted 2 years, it forced NASCAR to do something good for the fans. Now let's talk about the internal problems at 23XI Racing. This is Denny Hamlin and Michael Jordan's race team. And it turns out that 2 executives at the team were talking badly about Denny Hamlin behind his back for months or maybe years. Eugene Mason called Denny Hamlin a child in emails. The messages showed that Denny felt like nobody at his own team respected his opinion. Instead of talking to him like adults, these executives were mocking him when he wasn't around. And the worst part is that Denny only found out about this because the emails became public during the lawsuit. The big fight was about money. Curtis Polk complained that Denny likes to throw money at everything without being smart about it. But Denny wasn't trying to waste money. He wanted to invest in making the team better, buying better equipment, hiring better people, building a championship team. That's how you win races. But Polk thought they needed to spend less and be more conservative. Here's the problem. In racing, there's always tension between different departments. The crew chief blames the driver blames the car, everyone argues about what's wrong. That's normal, but when your own executives are calling you a child behind your back, that's not normal. That destroys trust, and without trust, you can't build a winning team. Then another bombshell dropped. An email from Michael Jordan's chief financial officer got leaked too. This was written in March 2024. The CFO started by praising Denny, saying, "Denny is a great driver, one of the best of all time. He is completely driven for 23XI to succeed." But then it got harsh. The CFO said Denny is a terrible businessman who thinks spending more money will automatically lead to wins. The email said, "He does not know as much as he thinks he does about race strategy and the other nuts and bolts of racing. He relies on regurgitating what Chris Gabehart says as if it were gospel." Chris Gabehart is Denny's crew chief. The CFO also said Denny ascribes to the dumb theory that if we spend more money, it will translate into wins and speed. This shows that the money people at 23XI think very differently than Denny does about how to run the team. Now imagine being Denny Hamlin right now. You're trying to fight NASCAR in court over unfair treatment. You're trying to run a competitive race team. And you just found out through public court documents that your own people think you're a child who doesn't know what he's doing. How do you walk into a meeting with these people? How do you trust them with anything? Kenny Wallace, who's been around NASCAR forever, gave his honest take on all this. He said everyone in NASCAR talks trash about each other behind closed doors. He described how drivers would sit in their buses with tinted windows and make fun of everyone outside, thinking they were the best and everyone else was stupid.
Everybody's assholes. Everybody. Everybody's, I'm better than you, you're dumb, I'm the greatest.
But Kenny also reminded everyone of an important lesson from Dale Earnhardt. The Intimidator used to say, just because you're a NASCAR driver does not mean you're any better than anybody. Dale Earnhardt started racing on small local tracks and always respected grassroots racers. That respect is completely missing from these leaked messages. The fans are absolutely furious. Some think NASCAR will survive this because NASCAR always survives. They believe the France family might even sell NASCAR to a big media company like Fox to get out of this mess. Other fans think the sport is done unless leadership completely changes. But everyone agrees on one thing: the current leadership has to go. One fan wrote, "NASCAR has governed with a heavy hand for decades. The our way or the highway approach doesn't fly anymore. NASCAR should have settled this case long ago, but arrogance got in the way." The trial starts December 1st. Judge Kenneth Bell already ruled that NASCAR does have monopoly power over premier stock car racing, which is a huge win for the teams. Rick Hendrick and Roger Penske, the two most powerful team owners in NASCAR, are being forced to give depositions even though they don't want to take sides. NASCAR Commissioner Steve Phelps tried to calm things down, saying he's trying his hardest to settle this before trial. But the leaked texts have already destroyed NASCAR's reputation. When your own president is calling legendary team owners stupid rednecks and threatening to destroy competitor series, fans lose faith. So what does Denny Hamlin do now? Does he fire Curtis Polk and Eugene Mason? Can he ever trust them again after learning they called him a child? The internal problems at 23XI might be just as big as the legal battle with NASCAR.
All of that pent-up frustration, animosity, has finally spilled out into the public. NASCAR and 23XI Front Row clashed.
A federal courtroom in Charlotte just became ground zero for the biggest fight in NASCAR history. On August 29, 2025, damaging leaked messages and a billionaire team owner's declaration of war turned a routine hearing into a spectacle that could destroy the sport as we know it. This isn't just about racing contracts, it's about power, control, and whether NASCAR can survive what's coming next. At the center of the storm is something called a charter. In NASCAR, a charter gives a team guaranteed entry into races and a larger cut of the prize money. Without one, teams have to qualify every week just to participate. It's like trying to defend your championship title, but not knowing if you'll even be allowed on the court. That's the reality 23XI Racing and Front Row Motorsports are facing. Earlier this year, both teams refused to sign NASCAR's new charter agreement, calling the terms unfair and restrictive. As a result, NASCAR stripped them of their charters, leaving their future hanging in the balance. The financial implications are staggering. Teams with charters receive a guaranteed portion of NASCAR's television revenue, which totals over $800 million annually from deals with Fox, NBC, and Amazon Prime. Without charters, teams lose access to this revenue stream and must rely entirely on sponsorship deals and prize money, a model that's proven unsustainable for most operations in modern NASCAR. Rather than quietly accept it, they fought back, with a federal antitrust lawsuit accusing NASCAR of monopolistic behavior and controlling the sport like a dictatorship. The case is scheduled to go to trial in December, but recent courtroom drama has already taken things to a new level. During a hearing in Charlotte, the court made public a treasure trove of internal emails and text messages from both sides. What they revealed was shocking. In one exchange, Michael Jordan lashed out after learning that Joe Gibbs Racing had signed the new charter deal. "Fakirs," he wrote, before adding, "Teams are going to regret not supporting us. PIs." In another, Jordan joked about spending money on a new driver by saying, "I've lost that in a casino. Let's do it." His co-owner and business manager Curtis Polk replied, "This is just a hobby," to which Jordan responded, "Only can play, but so much golf." The messages also revealed the timeline of Jordan's frustration. After NASCAR announced the new charter terms in early 2024, internal communications show 23XI executives scrambling to build a coalition of teams willing to reject the deal. They reached out to Hendrick Motorsports, Joe Gibbs Racing, and Team Penske, hoping the sport's most successful organizations would stand together. Instead, one by one, each powerhouse team quietly signed, leaving 23XY and Front Row isolated. But the 23XI camp wasn't the only side throwing verbal punches. In one particularly chilling message, Steve Laletta, president of 23XY, wrote that Jim France dying is probably the answer to getting fair charter terms, referring to NASCAR's CEO and a member of the France family that has owned the sport since its inception. Meanwhile, Denny Hamlin, Jordan's co-owner and driver, admitted in another message that his despise for the France family runs deep. The texts from NASCAR officials were equally explosive. President Steve O'Donnell described an earlier version of the charter agreement as one that would return the sport to its tiny southern roots, calling it dictatorship, motorsport, redneck, tiny sport. He wasn't praising it, he was venting his frustration. Commissioner Steve Phelps added that teams were being offered 0 wins in negotiations and that their only choice was to sign it or lose their charters. Behind the scenes, NASCAR executives were strategizing hard, discussing how to shut down any attempt by teams to launch a rival racing series. This included locking up all the major tracks and using IP restrictions in the new next-gen cars to prevent them from being raced outside NASCAR.